The luxury private jet gleamed beneath the morning sun, a perfect picture of privilege, but when two young black sisters walked toward it, the air suddenly changed. The flight attendant's smile faded, passengers whispered, and within moments they were accused of boarding the wrong plane. Laughter followed, cruel and cold. The sisters stood frozen, humiliated, with no idea that a single phone call would soon turn every smirk into silence. Before we reveal what happened next, make sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video because what you're about to hear will leave you speechless. It had started as a celebration. Amara and Nia, two sisters raised in Atlanta, had just graduated from college with honors. Their father, a quiet, reserved man who rarely spoke about his work, had surprised them with tickets for a private jet to New York. "You've earned it," he'd said simply. The girls, excited and grateful, dressed elegantly, ready for what felt like the start of a new chapter. But as they arrived at the private terminal, the atmosphere shifted. The staff exchanged uneasy glances. One attendant whispered something into her radio, while another asked almost mockingly if they were sure they were supposed to be there. When Amara showed the printed booking confirmation, the woman smiled thinly. "I'm sorry. This jet is for guests of Mr. Hamilton." The sisters looked at each other, confused. "That's us," Amara replied softly. The woman's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're the Hamilton guests?" she repeated, as if the words didn't fit. Moments later, the pilot stepped out, frowning. "Ladies, I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said, gesturing toward the gate. "This flight isn't available to the public." Embarrassment burned through their cheeks. Cameras from nearby passengers started recording. Some laughed quietly. Others whispered, "They must have sneaked in." Amara tried to explain, but the pilot waved her off. "Please, step aside before we call security." They moved to the corner of the lounge, holding back tears, unsure whether to call their father. Around them, luxury dripped from every surface. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, designer luggage, but none of it could hide the sting of being treated like they didn't belong. Amara clenched her phone tightly, trying not to cry in front of the crowd. Her younger sister, Nia, kept whispering, "Maybe it's just a mistake." But deep down, they both knew what this really was. The tone, the looks, the way people had stopped to stare. It wasn't a mistake. It was judgment. The pilot spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Ladies, you'll have to wait outside while we verify your information." His words carried a cruel finality. They walked toward the exit as a group of passengers chuckled, one man muttering, "Guess money can't buy class." Outside, the heat felt heavier than usual. Amara finally called their father, her voice shaking. "Dad, they won't let us board. They think we don't belong here." There was a pause, long, calm, but filled with a quiet storm. "Stay where you are," he said firmly. "Don't say a word to anyone." Meanwhile, inside the lounge, the staff continued chatting. The pilot laughed with a businessman, saying, "You'd be surprised how often people try to sneak in pretending to be rich." The businessman smirked. "Well, they didn't look like the Hamiltons I know." Minutes turned into an hour. The sisters sat silently on a bench, ignored by every staff member who passed. When they tried to ask for water, they were told, "That's for passengers only." A nearby woman even filmed them, whispering, "They probably forged something." Then a black SUV pulled up. The driver rushed out and opened the door. A tall man in a tailored suit stepped out, confident, composed, and radiating quiet authority. The whispers returned. Some thought he was security, others assumed he was another wealthy traveler. But as he walked straight toward Amara and Nia, the color drained from the flight attendant's face. He hugged his daughters, kissed their foreheads, and turned toward the crew. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding," he said evenly. His voice carried weight, the kind that made people stop breathing for a second. The pilot stepped forward awkwardly. "Sir, we were told these two—" The man raised a hand, cutting him off. "You told my daughters, to leave the jet I own." A ripple of shock spread across the terminal. Phones that had been recording suddenly lowered. The businessman who had mocked them froze in place. No one had realized that the quiet man they had dismissed as just another traveler was actually the CEO of the very company that chartered the jet, and one of the wealthiest private investors in the aviation industry. Amara stood beside him, trembling but proud. For the first time that day, she watched every single face around them shift from superiority to shame. The same mouths that had laughed were now silent, suffocated by regret. The terminal went completely silent. Every sound, with the faint hum of engines, the rolling of suitcase wheels, seemed to vanish as the man's words hung heavy in the air. The pilot stammered, "Sir, we had no idea." He turned to face him fully, his expression calm but cutting. "That's exactly the problem," he said. "You didn't want to know. You saw two young black women and assumed they didn't belong here." His tone was quiet, but each syllable landed like thunder. The flight attendant's lips quivered. "We were only following procedure," she whispered. "Procedure?" he repeated. "Is humiliation a part of your procedure?" Gasps rippled through the room. The businessman who had mocked them earlier suddenly looked down at his shoes, pretending to check his watch. The bystanders who had filmed for entertainment now tried to hide their phones. Realizing the story was no longer funny, he walked slowly toward the counter, placed his company ID on the desk, and said, "This airline operates under my license. Every person in this building works under my signature." The manager rushed out from the back, face pale, already sensing the disaster unfolding. "I built this company to make travel easier for everyone," he continued, "but today my daughters were treated like intruders because you couldn't see beyond the color of their skin." The staff froze. Some whispered apologies, others couldn't meet his eyes, but the damage was done, and everyone knew it. Then, in an unexpected move, he turned to the crowd. "Let this be a reminder," he said, his voice steady. "Power and wealth don't define worth. Respect does. And the way you treat people when you think no one's watching reveals exactly who you are." Amara and Nia stood beside him, no longer ashamed but strong, living proof that dignity doesn't need approval. As they finally boarded their jet, the same people who had mocked them moments ago watched in silence, faces heavy with guilt. The engines roared to life, echoing like justice taking flight. As the jet ascended through the clouds, Amara stared out the window, her reflection blending with the golden horizon. Nia leaned back, finally exhaling the weight she had carried all morning. The laughter, the stares, the humiliation, it all seemed to fade beneath the sound of the roaring engines. Their father sat across from them, silent, composed, but his eyes revealed the storm he'd kept contained. When the seatbelt light turned off, he finally spoke. "You'll face moments like this in life," he said softly, "when people decide who you are before you ever open your mouth. But never let their ignorance define your worth. Let your success speak louder than their prejudice." The sisters nodded, absorbing every word. They knew this flight wasn't just a journey across cities. It was a journey across experience, a reminder that the world still had walls to tear down. Meanwhile, back at the terminal, the story had already spread online. The video that was meant to mock the sisters now carried a different caption: "Racist pilot gets exposed by his own boss." Comments flooded in, thousands condemning the crew's behavior, others praising the father for his calm but powerful response. The airline issued a public apology within hours, promising new diversity and sensitivity training. But for Amara and Nia, the apology didn't erase what had happened. It only proved what their father had always told them. Some lessons can't be taught until they're lived. As the sun began to set beyond the clouds, Amara whispered, "Do you think people will ever change?" Her father smiled faintly. Change starts when shame turns into understanding, he said. And today, a few people learned that lesson the hard way. If you believe respect should never depend on skin color, hit that like button and subscribe for more real life stories that reveal the truth behind injustice. Because sometimes it only takes one moment, one act of courage to remind the world what dignity truly looks like.